Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Honorable Polly Trottenberg.
Good morning. It is fantastic to be here on behalf of the Biden administration, Secretary Buttigieg, and all of us at USDOT. I have to say, I was listening to some of the earlier speakers. This is my first res. I'm very excited to be here, but I promise you it will not be my last. And I'm happy to say I'm joined by a lot of my DOT colleagues who I will shout out in the course of my speech, but I particularly want to note how excited I am to be joined today by the Department of Transportation's first Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs, Orlando Teller. He was just sworn in last week. Let's give him a round of applause. And Orlando heads up an amazing tribal affairs team, Milo Booth, Eldridge Onko, and I'm so grateful for the work that they do. But one thing I just want to note, at USDOT and in the Biden administration, we know that it's important for those that are working to advance the lives and the economic prosperity of Native American and Indigenous people. It's not just a responsibility for those that have tribal affairs in their titles, it's a responsibility for all of us. And I have to say, there has never been a better time to be at USDOT and be working in transportation as we are implementing several, basically once-in-a-lifetime pieces of legislation, particularly the bipartisan infrastructure law. Today, I want to take a few minutes to talk about how tribal nations can participate, how you can engage in job creation, in contracting opportunities, as well as how you can compete and win transportation grants directly. And we all know why that's so important in the transportation space in tribal nations. Improving safety, improving accessibility to jobs, to schools, to opportunities, job creation, economic development, wealth creation. So I want to talk particularly about some of the exciting things that DOT has been doing with tribal nations, and then talk in particular about ways that you can take advantage of the bipartisan infrastructure law. I'm happy to say at DOT, I think we have been engaging with tribal nations all over the country, both visiting tribal nations and talking to them in Washington. Secretary Buttigieg, as some of you know, has been traveling throughout Indian country. I've had the honor recently to be in Oklahoma, spend some time with the Cherokee Nation Principal Chief Hoskin, talking about the needs that they've had there, and again, had tribes coming from all over the country to talk to us about their needs and how the federal government can better serve them. I want to just give a few highlights of some of the things we're doing together. One of the big focuses for USDOT has been roadway safety. And I think a lot of the folks in this room know we have an epidemic of roadway fatalities, and tragically, it's disproportionately in tribal areas. So one of the things we're working to do is to make sure that we're getting dollars and resources and technical expertise to tribal transportation organizations all over the country. There's so many ways that we can tackle this tragic loss of life. And just think, one thing I always like to say about roadway fatalities, these are not just numbers. These are our family, our friends, our coworkers, our neighbors. At DOT, we're also focusing on tribal consultation, tribal sovereignty and self-determination. As I mentioned, I had the honor last year of visiting Cherokee Nation, where I got to join Chief Hoskin in signing the first Tribal Transportation Self-Governance Compact. That compact is going to give the Cherokee Nation much more autonomy and ability to determine how their federal transportation dollars are spent, less having to come to DOT to get our permission and our oversight. We're very excited in that. It's the first of its kind, but there are a lot of other tribal nations that are already interested, and we're really looking forward to making sure we can stand that up with all nations that are ready. We've also begun hosting at DOT something we've done sporadically in the past, but a real focus on symposium, particularly focused on tribal needs. In transit, in aviation, and in maritime. We're going to be doing those tribal symposiums annually. It's given us an extraordinary chance to hear from all of you, learn a lot in the process, and find ways that we can be working together. We're also working now to stand up electric vehicles in tribal areas with the Electric Vehicle Initiative for Tribal Nations. 10 federal agencies, and I actually see one of my colleagues is here from Department of Energy, we're working together to coordinate EV charging and making sure that the benefits reach Indian country. Not only the benefits of having clean electric vehicles, but also the job creation and contracting opportunities that it's going to begin. I'm happy to say we're also coordinating very closely with the Department of Interior. As many folks in this room know, DOT and Interior share a lot of the responsibilities for tribal transportation. Secretary Buttigieg is coordinating a lot with his counterpart, Secretary Haaland. I've been working a lot with my counterpart, Deputy Secretary Boudreau, to figure out ways that we can make sure tribes are getting the dollars they need and that the process is coordinated between our two sister agencies. But now I want to turn to, I think, some of the key pieces of what will happen in terms of this big infrastructure bill, and I want to focus in particular on 3 areas. The one that I know is probably of the most interest in this room, contracting opportunities, but also workforce development and job creation opportunities. And then lastly, how to compete for federal grants with the Department of Transportation. One thing we're very concerned with the Biden administration, as we make this once-in-a-generation investment, we want to make sure that there's fairness in contracting and that communities that have not always benefited from federal contracting dollars will have the opportunity to do so. I know a lot of you in this room know that it's not easy necessarily to secure federally funded transportation contracts, especially for small and disadvantaged businesses. Bonding requirements, lack of access to capital, workforce challenges, there are a number of barriers we know you face. But I'm happy to say the Biden administration wants to work on the ground to make sure we're supporting businesses. We now have a range of resources at our department to help you potentially get certified as a disadvantaged business enterprise and to find opportunities to compete for work and work with larger contractors. I want to point out a couple, they're over in this corner of the room. I want to point out a couple of our best resources today. Tyra Redis, who's our acting director of the Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization Office at DOT, and Peter Kantakos, who runs our regional small business resource center. So Tyra and Peter, stand up so folks can see you. They're over in the corner there. These are the 2 folks that you want to get to know. They are doing extraordinary work on the ground, again, in our regional offices all over the country. They'll be part of some sessions here at the conference. Make sure you get a chance to talk to them. They are the ones on the ground that are helping small businesses access federal dollars and get into those contracts. Let me take a minute also to talk about workforce. We also know that the bipartisan infrastructure law and all the other pieces of legislation that have been recently passed are going to provide extraordinary job opportunities. We want to make sure that workers throughout the country, particularly, again, those that have not always benefited from federal dollars, have the opportunity to access those jobs, which can often be highly skilled, highly paid, enable you to support a family, and create generational wealth. We're focusing on all kinds of new job training and apprenticeship programs, on expanding local hire, to make sure that when an infrastructure project is being built in a given community, that those members of the community will have that opportunity to get those jobs. And we want to make sure that all of your members will have the opportunity to compete for those jobs. We have formed a deep working relationship with the Department of Labor, and we're also working with state and local and community-driven labor organizations throughout the country to make sure those job opportunities are available, and look forward also having the chance to talk to all of you about that throughout the day. Finally, I want to talk about something that is, I think, particularly near and dear to my heart, which is making sure that tribes can access federal grant dollars. We know that that can also be very difficult to compete at the federal level. We know the challenges of finding a match, of accessing the myriad complicated alphabet soup of grant programs can often be very challenging, but we have an extraordinary opportunity. We have never had so many dollars on the table. Last year, US DOT stood up 41 new programs. Some of them targeted particularly at small communities, at rural communities. This is an opportunity, I think, for unprecedented grant opportunities in tribal communities. But I also acknowledge that tapping those dollars can be challenging. So I want to make sure you get to connect while you're here at this conference, again, with Orlando and Milo and Eldridge and their team. We at DOT now have a number of programs specifically targeted at tribal areas and rural areas, particularly our Roots program, which focuses on how to access dollars if you're a rural community. Something I know a lot of you are probably familiar with, our Tribal Technical Assistance Program, known as TTAP, run through our Federal Highway Administration. We have a new Rural and Tribal Assistance Pilot Program, new ways to try and access federal dollars. We have, if you go on our website now, I think done an extraordinary job of trying to simplify and coordinate all the different programs. We have something now called our DOT Navigator, which shows you all our programs, gives you tips for how to access, and most importantly, I think connects you with our technical assistance team. We have a number of people at DOT now standing available to you to help you navigate our programs. For my final note here, I just want to end by again saying how excited and proud we are to have Orlando now as our first Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs. With Orlando and Tyra, I promise you, you will be in good hands to access our dollars, the job creation opportunities, the contracting opportunities, the chance to bring federal resources to tribal nations. And again, I hope fervently save lives in tribal communities. So with that, I thank you on behalf of the Biden administration, Secretary Buttigieg, and all of us at the United States Department of Transportation. We look forward to engaging with all of you throughout this wonderful conference. Thank you.